What are the 2 or 3 key kind of takeaways or things that organisations are considering when they're implementing these global systems?
It's a challenge, you know, if you're running a global compliance department, you're looking to put in place global policies, ideally you want that to be as simple as possible, but when you've got, you know, a number of schedules addressing the different jurisdictional issues or levels, it can be a challenge. So logically you either do go for the highest or you just then sort of recognise the idiosyncrasies across different jurisdictions. But it then makes it difficult to be consistent in terms of training and rollout and similar. So there are implications which, you know, you wouldn't necessarily immediately think are the case. It makes it more difficult as you're talking, you know, when you have your monthly global compliance discussion, you can't really talk on a similar basis because you are applying different levels potentially. Whereas if you do go to the higher level and you're engaging with somebody that's managing it, you then get the additional comfort, which is another challenge, I think, of independence within the different jurisdictions. Because I know that depending on where you are, is a real factor and a concern as well.
And do you find that it's different depending on, in terms of your firm structure, whether you have a centralised compliance function or whether you have local compliance functions with a global head, for example?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So it's the 2 different models really, isn't it? And so, but I think if you have a centralised compliance function, it's easier potentially in terms of consistency around reporting, communicating, training, all of those sorts of things. Whereas a global head overseeing arrangements in different jurisdictions probably has to, when he's presenting to the board, for instance, at the quarterly compliance deep dive, needs to be across the different jurisdictions to be able to talk to them in an articulate way. So, you know, there are challenges either side, I think.
Whenever we're talking to a customer, we always think, well, we're looking at doing 2 major things, which is protect the organisation and protect the people that work for that organisation. So what we need to ensure is that someone absolutely can make a whistleblowing report. Fundamentally, it doesn't matter which legislation you look at, someone has to be able to raise a concern, and that's fundamental. Whether you do that internally or whether you use an external, there's benefits and negatives to either side. You've got to make sure that people can make that report. Number 2 is, can my organisation then support that person effectively? So if I do have an internal system, for example, can I protect the anonymity of that person? Will they feel comfortable talking to someone internally, or would they rather talk to someone external? And thirdly, and probably up there with actually being able to make the report, is how does your organisation then respond to that report? Do they follow the timescales? Do they follow the deadlines? Do you follow your policies and procedures that you spent months and years debating over how they should be written? And can you perform an investigation efficiently, effectively, and independent enough to satisfy not just the regulator, not just your board, but the person who's made the report in the first place? Do they then have confidence in the system that you've actually built and then taken forwards and performed an investigation and come out with an outcome that would pass their criticism more than anything else? So they're definitely the big 3 things that we assist people as much as possible in achieving whenever we work with a new customer or a previous customer.
And what would you see as the biggest challenge for organisations in achieving that sort of anonymity and trust within the system?
It's definitely the independence of the function that looks after whistleblowing. We get lots and lots of companies who have a real dilemma about who that sits with. You know, does it sit with an HR function? Does it sit with a risk function? Does it sit with a compliance function, legal? You know, there's benefits and negatives of using any of them. But it's not just the perception of independence, it is real independence. You've got to have trust in the people who are managing it, that they can do that in a way that is not just compliant, but is transparent, is morally and ethically correct. But it's definitely something that's in the minds of your risk and audit chairs, that's within your ASG committees, that's within all of those functions within a business that are the checks and balances of everything that goes on. So it's always very, very hard to balance all of the myriad of requirements that go on. But definitely key, making sure that you get those 3 main pillars correct and working to ensure that you've got an efficient system that's working.
Great, thanks guys.